It is 8:30 a.m. in Athens, Georgia, 4:30 p.m. in Girl, Russia, 2:30 p.m. in Lady, France, 9:30 p.m. in Lassie, Indonesia. Hi, I'm Kalli, and this is Dylan.
Hi.
You're listening to Studio 595. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Studio 595. We're, as always, so excited to have you back. Today's episode is all about... That was like my celebration impression. It's all about Women's History Month, so...
I will debate to keep that in.
Yeah, no, that's going to be layered on top of her saying.
Yes. I'll give you the sound effect.
Thank you.
As long as I still get to keep whatever noise you just made.
But, I thought that was a good impression.
No, that is the sound effect.
And it just happened again.
Anyways, welcome back. We're excited to have you. This week, we are talking about Women's History Month, what it means to be a woman, especially, in this day and age, in this time period, in this place, Athens, Georgia. So I'm excited about this episode because, newsflash, I am a woman, if you didn't know.
Oh, wow.
I know. I'm the only woman in this podcast, which is an honor, a privilege, and a big responsibility. I have to represent all of the women by myself.
I have given you permission to sort of control this episode in terms of Kalli, behind the scenes, has been super excited about this episode for the last couple of weeks. We've actually been really productive as a team and have planned out essentially the rest of the episodes this season.
Scary.
Yeah, but there's plenty more content. But today is Kalli's day. Kalli's day to sort of take the reins of the show. And we are very excited, especially given highlighting women.
Yeah, and we have a lot of fun segments coming up that have to do with that. We're going to talk about some of our favorite women. We're going to talk to some women from my friend group and from the district. And I'm very just excited overall. I know I've said that a million times, but I am. So without further ado, let's get started.
So with this episode, I figured I would assign Kalli a task, and that task being asking women that she knows what it's like to be a woman. And so Kalli, since it is Women's History Month, again, this is your episode, and I have given you the reins, especially for this segment, because this is all you, all people that you know, and people that you've asked around. Before we get into that, though, from your perspective, Kalli, and this could be easily 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe even an hour-long discussion. In your personal view as someone, especially in your area of study that you wish to go into with journalism, and in every other aspect of contemporary, current-day American society, which is, this is a loaded question, and so I don't anticipate, making this more complicated than it already is. But in your perspective, how would you describe being a female in current day America, or just in society in general?
It is a loaded question. I'll try to keep it on the shorter end of things so that I'm not, taking up way too much time and bothering everybody. I mean, I think a lot goes into being a woman. And I wouldn't even say that I'm a woman yet. I'm more a girl. I'm younger. I haven't had as many life experiences, but I'll refer to myself as a woman just to make things easier. It is, first of all, an honor. Like I said, it's a privilege. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. I think even still in the modern day, now, more than any time period before, there's so much more that a woman can do. We're not just labeled and put into one category of okay, you can do this and you could do this, right? Now there's so many opportunities. So you really can forge your own path, which is cool and scary. But I think still there is that role of nurturer of like caregiver. And there's also this like a sense of being like a very brave woman, right? A very strong woman. And they're all things that are kind of tossed onto you as like, you need to be a strong woman, you need to be a brave woman, you need to be, you know, a leader and also a follower and also this, right? So in the midst of like all of these labels that get kind of tossed around, it's nice to, you know, sit down and kind of find out who you want to be as a woman growing. And my mom has always done a really good job of emphasizing that I can, you know, be whoever I want, right? I can forge whatever path I want to forge. And so for me, that's been journalism. And it hasn't been easy. It's actually been quite hard, especially being a young woman in journalism. It's hard to find that respect that you would think would come so easily. I've found that like, especially when I was working in like actual journalism and not this podcast, like more like writing, you have to work like kind of 10 times as hard to gain the same amount of respect as somebody who isn't working like nearly as hard as you are.
So you're saying that you're working 10 times as hard to get to the point that someone is already at sort of like a different starting point to begin with, and then a different sort of,
and also there's different expectations.
Yeah.
There's totally different expectations in the world for women. It's hard to explain being a whole gender to people, but it's such a rewarding experience because it's nice to know that you are strong and powerful and brave and inherently nurturing and kind, all of these things, if that makes sense. I have more to say, I just haven't figured it out yet.
And if, before we get into the responses that you got when asking, you know, such an important question as to, you know, what is it like to be a woman in current day, if you could give one message as someone that has this platform, what would you say to girls in your current position or girls in at a younger age in this district and just around our community? Like, what guidance would you give them?
I think about this a lot. Like if I could tell, I think of it as if I could tell my younger self something, what I would tell her. And so I think it applies to a lot of young girls. And that's number one, there's a couple points to this. Number one, be bold. Find what you like and stick to it no matter how scary it is. And you will 100% be in rooms that are filled with only old men. And you will be the only young girl there. And they will look at you like you're crazy. But at the end of the day, like, it's the best feeling when you know, are working alongside all these people and forging a new path. And then number two, don't be afraid to say what you actually mean to people. You don't have to sugarcoat everything you say to make people think that, you know, not hurt people's feelings, if that makes sense. Like, you're allowed to have bold opinions and say bold things that may cause harsh and difficult conversation. That I would even say more than anything is your role as a woman in journalism, but also just in the world. And then number three is just rely on the people in your life that have been there. You know what I mean? Find people who have done the things that you're trying to do and rely on them and ask them for advice. And if there aren't any, you got to become that woman for yourself, and you got to rely on yourself and get to that point and then be that for other young girls. And I think that all of this sounds overwhelming, but it makes you into a very strong individual, not even just a woman, just a strong individual. And it is so helpful to remember those things as you're walking through life and trying to make a person out of yourself. We're all just trying to make people out of ourselves.
Well, thank you, Kalli, for taking the reins. Hearing your perspective on things definitely is a good sort of predecessor for asking people that you know what it's like to be females as well. And having that sort of perspective for people in our own communities, I think that is important, because we often have a sort of general perspective that we assign from the sort of collective voice of females and women across the country and women across, every country, around the world. And so hearing people that are in our community and hearing their perspective, how they feel, especially in our current society, whether it be in our own local community or how they themselves assess how we have progressed as a country, is a really important benchmark to sort of see. So thank you for providing us with a very interesting perspective.
Well, thank you for giving it to me. I always like to say I'm very blessed to have this platform. I'm very blessed to be able to do this all the time. But that in no way means that what I'm saying and how I feel is the way that every woman across the globe feels.
Right.
And every woman is so vastly different, and we all have different experiences with what it means to be a woman and what it means to grow into being a woman. And I'm grateful that I get to share my experience, and I hope that we get to continue to share the experiences of other people. Yeah.
What it means to be a woman from my perspective is all about how you feel. Gender is rather tricky, but where I feel most like a woman is when either I or a friend have those girl boss moments where we just do something that's so great and deserves praise. I feel closer to them and get to connect over being a woman together. Being a woman also can be defined as how we are treated in society, which is sadly mostly negative. For example, one time when I was like, oof, I am a woman, was when I had to buy pepper spray to be able to walk to work because I was catcalled one night. However, on the positive side, one stereotypically female thing to do is to wear makeup or get your hair done. And even though your gender isn't based off of that, when I get dressed up or take self-care days, I'm really happy to be myself, and I just happen to feel like a woman.
Being a woman to me is definitely being slay 24/7, no matter the occasion, no matter what's going on. Just being slay. Slaying the day away, always looking good, being confident, being yourself, doing what makes you happy. I feel like that's just what being a woman is, just being confident 24/7 and just looking great and being a boss.
For me, being a woman means to be empathic, smart, empowered, and compassionate. And womanhood isn't defined by the unrealistic standards or expectations placed in the media. Every woman is unique, and our differences should always be cherished.
Being a woman is being a caregiver, is being a protector, in a different way than a man, and in some similar ways as well, and also in being a foundation, being a constant, being a helper, honestly, and a steady, stable force of support are really, really important components to being a woman.
It means to be a good woman. I think it takes compassion, understanding, flexibility. I think it takes sacrifice, and I wouldn't change being a woman for anything in the world. I love it, and I love being a mom. That's it.
A special thank you to Kalli's friends and family and everyone that was mentioned in the video for giving such a thought-provoking answer to such a thought-provoking question. And now we move on to district updates and our can't miss minutes. So let's get right into our can't miss minutes, brought to you by the Better Together newsletter created by my colleague and friend of the podcast, Scott Thompson. Make sure to subscribe to it on our district website to be up to date with everything going on in the district on a weekly basis. CCSD's Department of Family and Community Engagement announces the return of the Bridging the Gap Community Forums. The next forum will be tomorrow, Saturday, March 4th, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at the Pinewood Estates Oasis Pavilion. CCSD administrators and support staff will be on hand to hear from families, answer questions, and offer support in several areas. Be on the lookout for announcements of future forums. Moving on, and a reminder for families and students that next Wednesday, March 8th, will be an asynchronous learning day for students grades pre-K to 8. Students will not report to school. Also, Thursday and Friday, March 9 and 10, are also student holidays. The CCSC registration kickoff, early registration for pre-K and kindergarten for the 2023-2024 school year has ended, but registration for the coming school year is ongoing in the Student Registration Center at the district office on Prince Avenue. Remember that registration is a two-step process, including an online pre-visit application and then an in-person portion of registration. Please go to clark.k12.ga.us/registration to access the online application and a complete list of all required documentation you will need to bring with you to the Student Registration Center. And finally, congratulations to Andreas Dilly's 8th grader at Clark Middle School for being the runner-up at the Georgia Association of Educators Region 7 Spelling Bee on Saturday, February 25th. Andreas will now advance to the GAE State Spelling Bee, set for March 17th. A top 2 finish there, and he will qualify for the Scripps National Spelling Bee in late May, early June 2023. That does it for the Can't Miss Minutes. Let's turn it over to Kalli and Dylan for some pop culture updates and more Studio 595.
Now for something actually important. Blake Shelton is about to produce his last season of The Voice. He has been on the show since 2011 when it premiered. This is an emotional topic for me, considering my Yaya and I love Blake Shelton and his time spent on The Voice. This will be his 23rd season. Secondly, a daughter used TikTok to help her dad's book go viral 11 years after it was published. Such a sweet story. If you want to look it up, it's very heartwarming. The dad is crying in the video. It's just so emotional.
Snapchat is releasing an AI chatbot based on ChatGPT's latest version. Snapchat GPT will be available for Snapchat Plus subscribers soon. A reminder for all you Wii U and 3DS owners, if you're still out there, the Wii U and 3DS eShop is going to be closing on March 27th. So if you haven't, buy Splatoon 1 if you don't own that, and hey Pikmin on the 3DS.
The World Baseball Classic will kick off on March 7th with 20 teams playing baseball across 4 different cities: Miami, Phoenix, Tokyo, and Taichung, Taiwan. I would definitely recommend watching this tournament if you're not already a baseball fan, for the pure talent and the majesty of international baseball. You get to see players like Mike Trout captaining Team USA. You get to see Japanese icon Shohei Ohtani. You get to see a very, 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 very stacked Dominican Republic team. And you get to see teams that you didn't really know were that invested in baseball, like Italy, Panama, Australia, the Czech Republic, Great Britain, Nicaragua, and Israel. I would definitely watch it. It's always hype, especially after a home run. Typically, you have a very stoic reaction in the bench. But in the World Baseball Classic, it is just, as some of my British friends like to say, more limbs than a pack of squid. So it should be a very fun couple weeks if you're a baseball fan. And finally, a band very near and dear to me, Radiohead's first album, Pablo Honey, recently celebrated its 30th anniversary. And I know that it's not necessarily the best album, although I would recommend it for some early 90s grunge music if you're into that. But it's nice to see humble beginnings, flashback to our first episode, of a band that would later become a staple to alternative rock, especially in the 90s, and that later blossomed into one of the most popular bands in the world. And so to wrap up this episode for Women's History Month, I thought, with, of course, permission from Kalli, if I could set up a normal, a fun segment that we typically have at the end of the show. And so I thought that we would list our top 5 most influential women in our personal lives. And so how this is going to work is essentially we're just going to take turns ranking our top 5, and this isn't necessarily to be competitive or anything like that. It is just honestly highlighting the women that are personally very influential in our lives and provide us aspirational, inspirational thoughts and thought-provoking questions, and their lives have, served as a touchstone for what we want to achieve as people, and sort of inspiration on how to carry on, especially during times of difficulty. And so
every woman on this list is powerful and strong and our favorites, obviously. I want to preface them being at the bottom of the list does not mean that they are at the bottom of anything. They are just at the bottom of our number 5 ranking out of 5.
all of these women are S-tier women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Please adopt me.
And so I'll start off by actually mentioning someone who is, funny enough, younger than myself. And that would be Malala Yousafzai, who is honestly a massive inspiration to myself from the start of her sort of trajectory. If you don't know who Malala is, she is a massive advocate for education, especially for girls and for women in Pakistan. And she's, funny enough, 2 months younger than me, almost to the day. But nevertheless, an incredibly passionate and inspirational person, especially with the unfortunate events that happened about a decade ago, in which she survived an assassination attempt, and she has continued to be an adamant advocate for women's education and for women's progress, while also being an extremely kind and peaceful person. Genuinely has won the hearts and respects of many, many, many people. And so for that reason, I put her in my top 5. And I think that it's important, at least for my list, as someone who is an older member of the show, to reflect on I wouldn't say next generation, because I am a part of that generation, but to reflect on people that are younger than myself, who are already making incredible jumps and moves for women's education and, every sort of movement. And so I figured that Malala would be my number 5. As we go on to Dylan.
All right, my number 5 is Rachel Lake, who is just my favorite singer at the moment, making the song.
All the songs. Fair. And what about her particularly is influential, I guess I would say?
Okay, so the music is kind of like early mid-2000s rock, but like made today. Kind of different styles too, like some of her band songs will more electronic or chiptune-y. So the music really resonates with me, especially her song Empty Diary, which is about like writer's block. And I've been listening to her songs on loop since I found out about them. So,
and I'd say that's the best kind of role models sometimes, is the ones that you're just casually interacting with on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
And so we go to Kalli for her number 5.
My number 5 is Ida B. Wells. If you don't know who Ida B. Wells is, she is an African-American journalist who helped launch the NAACP, and along with that led basically one of the first anti-lynching crusades in the U.S. She also was an advocate for women's suffrage, and was an investigative journalist. So obviously you can see how she would be a big role model to me as I forge my path into journalism. I can see my predecessors behind me, the people who came before me, who made this possible for me, and she was definitely one of them.
Ida B. Wells was definitely within my range, or my honorable mentions for the people that almost but didn't quite make my list for my top 5, but very happy to see Ida B. Wells mentioned.
For sure.
With her legacy and really different aspects of American society. And so I actually took quite a turn with number 4. And in terms of music, both of our hosts know I listen to plenty of music. And one of the people that has been very influential in my life has been Celia Cruz, who was a Cuban-American salsa singer and performer, And even in my own personal experience, while I don't typically listen to salsa, in case if anyone is curious, I don't dance. That is outside of my purview, musically speaking. But nevertheless, her story, her personality in general while performing, is just something that, even for the most stiff-bodied people like myself who do not dance, you just can't help but dance to her music. And I feel like that's a very powerful, ability to have and to have for such a long period of time. And I actually learned recently that she will be featured on the U.S. Quarter soon, after gaining a lot of support for being featured on the Quarter. I want to say it's for some sort of series on highlighting women, and I'll definitely mention it in the video version of this episode as to what the exact series of of U.S. currency she'll be featured in. In terms of personality, in terms of always having a positive attitude for being a very passionate and eccentric person, especially as being a fellow Hispanic person, it really epitomizes the influence of Latin American music, especially Caribbean music, with salsa and different types of danceable music that sort of penetrated the American society, especially during the 80s and 90s and moving forward. So she is my number 4. And it was honestly a tough place to put her, because honestly she could fit anywhere between number 2 and number 5 for me, because of her influence and because of how fun she is. Like, if she's definitely an answer to like, who would you have as a dinner guest kind of question. And now we move over to Dylan for his number 4.
My number 4 is Kim Swift, who designed Portal, one of the most influential puzzle games, video games of all time.
I didn't know that. That's cool. And definitely a very influential and fun video game. We love and respect women in STEM.
Portal is a good game. If you haven't played it, why haven't you? But yeah, she led the original design team, before it was even called Portal. It was like Vernacular Drop or something.
I feel like Portal is a more punchy name.
Yeah. It had a completely different art style too.
Yeah, and to lead the design team on a game that is well known for its design.
It's a slay.
Very good game. And I do know a lot about it despite not playing. Now, did she also contribute to the Portal sequels?
Well, I don't know about sequels. They only made another one, but...
Oh, wait. Oh, it was just Portal 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will Google that. Portal 2.
Well, was she a part of the design team, or just the team in general for Portal 2?
Best known for her work at Valve for Portal and Left 4 Dead. I'm not sure. Okay, so
another really
iconic
good
game.
Yeah,
honestly.
another really
Left 4
good
Dead's
game.
iconic.
So games: Narbacular Drop, Half-Life 2 Episode 1, Portal, Half-Life 2 Episode 2, Portal Still Alive, Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, Quantum Conundrum, Pixeled, Soul Fjord, and Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Impressive.
Yeah, definitely probably one of the most influential people, especially in Valve.
Yeah.
And
In the world of game design.
yeah, I was about to say, and to be a big name at Valve was essentially to be a big name in video games, regardless. So cool. Kalli, your number 4.
My number 4 is none other than Miss Jackie Kennedy. She was the symbol of American hope and strength. After what she went through, she continued to persevere. She created a scholarship fund for underprivileged children who were working to honor John F. Kennedy's legacy, along with his brother's legacy, and also consistently worked with American children to better their lives. Up until basically the day that she passed away, she was always working to better the country. I look to her in a lot of ways, especially coming from an immigrant family. When it comes to looking at the American dream and being a woman, it's Jackie Kennedy. My family loved the Kennedys my whole life. My mom tells me this story about how there was a picture of Jackie Kennedy and the Kennedys in my yaya's house, my grandmother's house, and how she grew up kind of thinking that was her uncle. So my family loves them, and that is our symbol of the American dream.
And definitely one of the most iconic American first ladies.
Yes.
Despite the fact that she was very shy and tried to stay away from the limelight, actually. That is a very nice choice.
Not to mention her killer outfits.
Yes.
Iconic.
A fashion icon as well as a political one. And as someone from Massachusetts, I cannot overstate the love for Jacqueline Kennedy in my home state. We'll move on to number 3, specifically my number 3, and that would be mid-century labor icon Dolores Huerta, another Hispanic American, fought a lot, and I mean a lot, for agricultural workers and very lower middle class workers to help with their labor disputes and really just fighting for not just Latin American workers, but really anyone in the very politically active 60s and 70s. And while a lot of the time Cesar Chavez is highlighted, I think that the impact and the, for lack of a better word, fierceness of Dolores Huerta cannot be overstated. An absolute titan of Latin American influence in American society, especially in the sociopolitical realm, and definitely someone whose tenacity and strength and capacity to keep fighting for what she believed in is definitely, at the very least, commendable, and also at the very least extremely inspirational. And so she is my number 3 as we go over to Dylan for his number 3.
All right, so my number 3 is another programmer, but she didn't just work on games. She also worked on a few of the 3D engines that like 90% of other games run on. And she also designed experiments for nuclear physics research, which is just insane, honestly.
We love women in STEM.
Yeah.
Rock on. Wait, what is I missed her name. I'm sorry.
Corinne Yu.
Awesome. I'm loving the diversity of the people that we picked, especially because they are inspirational to us in completely different ways. And so to round out the number 3s, we go to Kalli.
In a long lost segment made long ago called Coachella Acts, we got to decide
The one that didn't get published.
That's why I said long lost.
Oh, yeah.
Episode. It didn't get published, but whoever, it was a game, basically, to sum it up. And whoever won this game got to hold one musical opinion throughout the rest of the season that was going to stand true, that could not be disputed until the summer. And I won, newsflash, because I'm a winner. And my opinion was that country music is one of the best, if not the best, genres of music, and that it was coming up on a renaissance is the word I was looking for. But fully back my opinion on this. I would like to say that Dolly Parton is my number 3. She is not only a country music, icon. Come on now. But she's also a symbol for creating generational wealth. Growing up, she was very poor, and she stepped into making music. She worked her tail off, and not only did she work her tail off, she barely ever sees a dime of her money. A lot of the time, she keeps enough to live off of, and other than that, donates everything to charity. I think that I read something that said that's the reason she's not a billionaire, because she donates all of her money to charity, to environmental causes, to students. She builds schools.
The Imagination Library.
I was about to
the
talk.
world famous Dolly Parton Imagination Library.
I signed up for the Imagination Library actually to receive books to build, my future library for my future children, and the variety of books that she sends out are amazing. It's books about different cultures, books about different people and places and things, and they're all, it's beautiful, and it's free. Like, you don't have to pay a dime, and they'll send your kids books from the time that they're 1 to the time that they're 5, and you get a book every month. So that's like lots of books.
That is 60 books for
It's
free.
a lot of books for free. She's just so influential, so strong, a female icon for sure.
And at the time of our long lost Coachella segment, when Kalli decided to make her opinion be known about country music, at first I scoffed, or not necessarily scoffed, I wouldn't go that far, but as someone that doesn't regularly listen to country music, or I should say, even as someone that doesn't listen to a lot of country music, I would say that Dolly Parton is not only an icon in country, she is an icon in education, she is an icon in a million different realms, and more than anything, not to discredit her from anything else, but she is indeed a woman icon.
Yes, for sure. And if you don't have a female icon to look up to yet, young girls, I suggest that you 100% research who Dolly Parton is.
Also, watch Steel Magnolias. She's great in that movie.
She's good in 9 to 5. She's good in Steel Magnolias. She's good in everything, and she makes the best music. She has her whole life. So
she is by far the most wholesome and most quote, I wish to hug this person, end quote, character in Steel Magnolias. And it does genuinely feel like they just brought Dolly Parton in to act like herself.
Somebody give this woman a biopic movie.
It can't be understated, her influence in so many things in American society. And to be that kind of person while also being recognized for what essentially you do the most in terms of music, being heavily respected in, your craft, and then going outside of that and doing acting and doing all sorts of, different projects and different aspects of making an impact in the culture. She really checks off a lot of the boxes for definitely one of the most influential people ever. We go to number 2, and in that same realm of talking about musicians that do multiple things and that are extremely influential towards our society, I went with, of course, Nina Simone, who is one of my favorite artists, favorite musicians, favorite singers, however you want to put it. One of my favorite people that has ever existed. Stage presence, her ability musically, her ability to not just perform the music, but to write music that is very permeant in especially the 1960s. An incredibly influential time to an incredibly difficult time to sort of stand out, because there's so many things going on socially in America in the 1960s, and Nina Simone sticks out in that time period. She was a very strong advocate for so many things, and on top of that, made bangers, incredible music. If you haven't listened to Nina Simone, I would strongly recommend her music, and I would strongly recommend looking into the Netflix documentary. I don't remember it, but I will add it in the video. I would strongly recommend that as your homework for the weekend, I guess.
Producer Alex is giving homework.
Being
This really
assigned homework?
is the Clark County School
I
District.
am assigning homework to our audience to consume Nina Simone music and the documentary, and in the same breath, look into all the people that we've mentioned today, because
Or
they're
at least some of them.
or at least some of them.
15 people. I mean, it's actually not that many, but if you don't have the time, just look into some of them.
Yeah, and because there's so many people to highlight in terms of Women's History Month that we could make a top 100.
Definitely. I couldn't even put all the people I wanted to on this list.
Yeah, and so really just pick whoever you find most interesting. Look into someone else and keep looking into other people, because we will be mentioning people. We have been mentioning people that are extremely influential in one way or another, whether you even have heard of them or not. All right, and so we go to Dylan for his number 2.
All right, my number 2 is Margaret Hamilton, who developed the flight software for NASA's Apollo program and coined the term software engineer.
That is
That's so cool. That's awesome.
that is quite a legacy
Yeah.
to hold up.
Can you imagine coining the term software engineer? We say it so often. We've said it about people in this list, software engineer, and now she is the software engineer.
And
That's so sick.
not to mention, being a part of the Apollo program is quite a feat in itself. I think that would make anyone's life highlight.
Especially programming with those like early computers.
Yes. Yes. Oh my.
Having how much RAM? Like,
Think about the specs.
yeah.
Think
like,
about the limitations that they had.
all of that on such
Women in
low-grade
STEM.
hardware, which was like cutting edge at the time. Like,
Dylan
Impressive.
has been highlighting women in STEM, and
Yes.
we can't get enough of it. Especially because, especially with the technological advances that we've had in the last, I mean, really just input any amount of years, and we've made massive jumps. But it's important to highlight not only the women in STEM, but the women in STEM that have been extremely influential and extremely important for things that we take for granted, especially in the year 2023.
yeah, I want to meet this woman.
Yes.
Is
Oh
she
my
still
goodness.
alive?
I
Yeah.
do.
Sick.
I do as well.
If you're listening, you are 100% invited onto the podcast.
Yes.
1000% you are invited onto the podcast.
Miss Margaret Hamilton, if you're by chance listening
I'll
to
send it to you.
this podcast, we have a modest audience, so I will ask people to not spam Margaret Hamilton on whatever social media she may be, if she has one, to come onto the show. But Miss Margaret Hamilton, if you by chance in the void of the internet are listening to
School
this
District's podcast.
this specific podcast, please come onto the show. It would be an absolute blast.
That goes for every woman on this list, if you're alive, obviously.
Also, that was a rocket pun I just made.
Yes.
In terms of it being a blast.
I didn't know,
in
I
case
didn't
of
know
no
if that
one-
was intentional or
Yeah,
not. So
It would be
it was
a
completely
blast.
unintentional. But afterwards, I'll take credit for it for being intentional. We go to Kalli for her number 2.
Okay, guys, we're getting personal now. Top 2 on my list, I had to reserve for family, I think, because, come on now, my family. But this spot, number 2, goes to all of my grandmothers. All of them. To my yaya, who immigrated to this country and was strong and was brave and forged an amazing life for her children and grandchildren. To my grandma, who is so sweet and kind and teaches me so much about life and reading and writing and just being a good person. She always listens to the podcast. To my granny, who is the funniest person I've ever met, and just always gives the best hugs. She's so sweet. And to my Nana, who is so kind and always thinks of me in every situation, to call me and to text me and to send me cards on birthdays and stuff. I love all of you, and you are the backbone of our family and the most inspirational people, and the most inspirational women, some of them who I know. So thanks.
What a heartfelt message. That being said, my number one is my mom. Just putting it out there. My mom, we could do this show for 3 hours and I could not say every good thing I have to say about my mom. An absolute inspiration for being a steady hand during times of crisis, during very difficult times, during, there was a time period, not to get too personal, but she was raising the three of us, myself and my siblings. And now, even now, she is a very steady hand. She is indeed the matriarch of our family. And there is no putting into words how important my mom is to myself, to my family, to everyone involved. And she has this grace of being as humble, but being as helpful as possible. There is not one moment in which I've been going through a struggle that my mom hasn't helped me out in. And especially being the first person in my family to get a college degree, to say that my mom wasn't an inspiration would be the biggest lie I've ever told. And there is probably no greater moment that sort of encapsulates what my mom means to me than the image that we have at home of me hugging my mom after my college graduation. That is probably, I would say, the greatest moment of my life. To be able to reach that goal that my mom instilled in me as a child, and to sort of get over that last hump, and to do it while working as hard as I could, because I knew that my mom instilled in us an incredible work ethic, and to be an inspiration to all of us at every stage of our lives, and not only that, but to immigrate to this country in a time of war and at such a young age, and to have the trajectory that she's had in her life. I know that she treats our accomplishments as her own, not in a sort of self-grandiose way, and I don't think that she would ever take credit for anything that we do. But I know that she really does try to instill a purpose for us to do our very best. And I feel like that is what any parent would want for their own kids. But thankfully, I have to say that my mom is easily the most influential person in my life. And I had that number one spot. Specifically, I already knew before anyone was added to my list that my mom would be my number one. And so thank you, Mom, if you happen to be listening.
We love you, Mama Marchante.
And thank you for always being the drive for all three of us, and really for many people in our family. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we go on to Dylan for his number one.
All right, my top pick for most influential women was Ada Lovelace, who designed the first algorithm intended to be carried out by a computer before the computer was even made, and is literally the first computer programmer.
Yeah, I was about to say the first computer programmer, the first computer scientist. My goodness, I mean...
Yeah, So influential that NVIDIA named their latest GPU architecture after her.
We may as well just name everything.
Yeah.
Really, after her, especially in the computer science realm. There are very few positions, especially in a workforce, very few positions in which your work specifically influences
Everybody.
the progress of time.
Yeah.
the progress of one's own community, society, the world, and so we owe a great
Basically, the
debt.
entire field of computer science
Yes.
is led by women.
Yes. Women in STEM. What a legacy.
Yeah.
And so we go to Kalli for her number one to wrap up this segment.
Hi, everybody. I think that we all know who my number one is going to be. I love my mom. My mom, her name's Eleni, by the way. I talk about her all the time on this podcast. So if you listen, you know, like, my mom is my best friend. And she is just everything. She is the best person I know. The most real person I know. She is so, talk about strong women. My mom is coming up. You know what I mean? She raised me and my brother as a single mom for years and years and years, and basically played the role of mom and dad. And I'll forever, be grateful to her for that. She has never, ever not allowed me to be who I want to be and do what I want to do. And even when we were living under the poverty line, would find ways for me to do every activity possible. Soccer or after school clubs or whatever it was, always found a way to make it happen. Words don't, I don't think, express how, much I love my mother. And on top of that has just been that person for me. The person who I, aspire to be like at the end of the day. I always ask myself, I'm like, how am I ever going to be as good of a mom as my mom is? Like, how did she manage to raise us to be such good people and also save herself in the process and keep herself kind and hopeful and loving and all this stuff? And I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I can be as good of a mom as my mom was to me. And she is just my number one role model. I knew that this spot was going to go to her, like Alex said. I knew that my mom was going to have my number one spot. I can't imagine anybody who's more influential in my life. She literally, first of all, she created me, formed me, grew my bones and stuff. But then
that's quite a legacy to hold, from your perspective.
Yeah. And then, also, raised me and grew me emotionally and grew me spiritually and grew me physically and all this stuff, and never ever left, never walked out, even though I would have. We were hard kids, and was just the most kind, loving person I've ever met. I love you, Mom. You're the best. And I know that you always listen to every single episode of this podcast because you support me no matter what I do, even when it's stupid. You read all my articles, you watch my podcast, you take me to soccer, you do everything for me. You are the best mom in the world, and I appreciate you. Thank you. Love you.
There is no...
Moms rule the world.
I feel like the greatest influence is to be someone that really is irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And so I feel like all the women that we have mentioned are really irreplaceable because there is no one that can fill in those shoes other than the people that we mentioned. There could not be the influence, the weight in what everyone has done if it wasn't for them being themselves. If it wasn't for a million things going exactly the right way, we wouldn't have the women that we've highlighted today. And I feel like that's extremely important to think about when we look at not only just this month being Women's History Month, but in terms of history itself, to sort of understand the influence of what one person can do with all the difficulties that come along with it, when you're thinking about the first person to do X or Y or Z, or to think about members that are members of your family or members of your, your friends or people that are really important to you, when you think about why they are important to you, you can't overlook their lives and what led them to that moment. And I feel like that's extremely important whenever we look at history, and extremely important, even more so when we talk about women's history and the sort of history of every single social movement and change in history due to women. And so, Kalli, that being said, if you wish to end your own episode, please do.
To start, I guess, wrapping it up, there's so much to say, I guess. There's so many things you can say to the people who are listening, the young women who are listening, the old women who are listening. But I just have a couple things to say before we wrap up. Number one, to all the young, old, and middle-aged women who are listening, you are irreplaceable. That's you. We're talking about you. Everything that you do in your workplace, at school, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, wherever you're at, your job as a woman is totally irreplaceable. You are doing a hard work, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or working 3 jobs or the CEO of a company, you're totally irreplaceable to the people around you. And just so know that and keep that in mind. And number 2, to the young women specifically who are listening, it's gonna be difficult doing whatever you're trying to do. It just is. It's just, the state of the world. It's harder to get people to respect you sometimes. It's more difficult to catch up, right? I've said that, but it's possible, and it feels really, really good when you do it. So work your hardest, and know that if one door is closing, another door is always opening. But I always try to remind myself. You're the best. Whoever is listening, you're the best. And you are worthy, and you are strong, and you are going to be the next person to make history. And one day you'll be on somebody's top 5 women's list. That's what I think, because we're the next generation of women doing important things. So as of right now, I'm Kalli.
I'm Dylan.
And this has been Studio 595. Peace out.